Okay, guys. So I did not think this was going to be the word that the Lord actually had me release because there was another word that He had placed on my heart. But God's ways are not my ways. His thoughts are not my thoughts. He sits higher than me. I am just a worker for the Lord. He's the boss. So I was reading my devotional this morning, and the Lord began to speak something to me through the devotional. And as I was reading the devotional, he brought to my remembrance something that happened to me at the end of 2020. And I'm going to share that with you guys because I know that this word is going to bless who it's for. I legit I did not plan on releasing this word. I thought he was going to have me release something else, but that word is obviously on hold. The title of this word is this is day 20 of Unfogged, 31 Days of God Lenses. But the title of this word is From Dents of Disappointment to Destiny. Stop bracing for bad news. From dents of disappointment to destiny. Stop bracing for bad news. And I don't know who this is for out there, but this is for somebody that God has promised to do something for you, through you, with you, whatever the case may be. And you've had false starts to what God has promised you. And when I give you what the Lord dropped in my spirit, that happened to me personally during a certain type of season of my life, this will make more sense. But many of you, you know what God has promised you. It could be the house, the finances, the marriage, the restoration, whatever it is, this can go a million different ways. God has promised you something, and you either one have had false starts, and those false starts took a bite out of your faith in God. You didn't lose faith, but it took a huge chunk out of your faith and your belief in God to do this thing, right? Or two, you've just had like good starts that turned bad your whole entire life, or at least for quite a few seasons. Things would go really good, and even in the good, you were bracing for the bad. And for some of you guys, the bad did happen. Like God allowed you to experience some things after being in a good spot, and you thought that you were in the spot that God was going to finalize this thing, and it didn't happen that way. Okay. So, again, with this word, the Lord is saying, from dents of disappointment to destiny, stop bracing for bad news. Okay. The Lord dropped something that happened to me in 2020 in my spirit this morning. And this isn't about me. Just take it how you see fit. This isn't about my journey. This has nothing to do with me, but everything to do with you if God is speaking this to you. Okay. And like I said, this word can go a million different ways. Okay. But I remember in 2020, and in 2020, I was actually standing for marriage restoration. And marriage restoration does not necessarily mean I was standing for God to restore my relationship to my ex-husband. When God calls a husband or a wife to stand in the gap for their spouse, is not necessarily to stand in the gap for them to be restored to you. You're standing and covering that person so that their soul can be saved, so that they can go in the will of God, so that they can walk in the path that God has destined for them, so that they could fully surrender to God. You're standing for restoration of their marriage to God. Now, if God chooses to restore their marriage to you, that's a bonus. But you're literally standing in the gap. When you stand in the gap for a restoration of a marriage, and God is like, Stan, I'm going to restore this marriage. He's initially saying, Stan, I'm going to restore this person's marriage to me. This person is going to be reconciled to me. And once they're reconciled to him, everything else will be added onto that, because once they're reconciled to God, they're walking in alignment with God. They know the way that God is sending them. Their thoughts begin to become in alignment with God's thoughts. So they begin to walk rightfully. Okay. So that is what you're standing for. And so many people are so gung ho over, God is restored. He told me to stand for restoration. He's initially telling you to stand for restoration of that person being reconciled to him. You don't even want a person that's not reconciled and married to God. You don't want that. So initially, when he says, stand, I'm going to restore this marriage, he's referring to whoever that person is, if it's your husband or your wife, or even some children. You may be standing for prodigal children. He's telling you to stand for restoration of that marriage, of that person or those people being restored to him. And if he has spoken to you about how you're divinely connected to this person, whether you are the wife they're supposed to be with, you're the husband they're supposed to be with, that comes with the territory anyway. Because once they seek first the kingdom of heaven, God, and all his glory, everything else is added. So they begin to walk rightly with God. And if they are divinely connected to you, that connection is going to come into play, but it has to be God first. He has to be the foundation of their lives. So back in 2020, I'm not a stander anymore, and you guys are very aware of that, but I'm saying it because there's been a lot of new brothers and sisters in Christ that have joined Bold for Christ. Welcome. I hope God sent you and you didn't send yourself. Take me to God, take this ministry to God. Just make sure you're supposed to be here, okay? But welcome. I'm happy to have you. But I used to stand in the gap for my ex-husband. And in 2020, that's what I was doing. And I was still pretty new in my walk with God. So at that time, I didn't fully understand the concept of standing. I too thought it was standing for the restoration of the marriage, and so forth. And, I was still very new in my walk. And I didn't even have this ministry in 2020. So that should tell you how new I was. This ministry started March of 2021. But in 2020, I was standing for my marriage. And I'll never forget on 10/11, 2020, the Lord gave me a dream. And he gave me a dream of marriage restoration, right? I was divorced at this time. And there was so much that happened in the dream, but it was a dream of marriage restoration. And I woke up super excited because nobody could tell me like otherwise. Nobody can tell me any differently than what God showed me. I knew what God had showed me in that dream. I knew what I prayed for when I went to sleep. And I didn't pray for my marriage to be restored before I went to sleep. I prayed and I asked God, right? And I wouldn't even consider myself a prophetic dreamer at this time, but I knew God spoke through two people through dreams. So I remember on 10/10 of 2020, before I went to sleep, I prayed to God and I said, Lord, if I can go and date other people and find the husband that you have for me and it's somebody other than my ex-husband, I was like, let me know in a dream because I know you talk to people in dreams. I just want your guidance. So if I am free to date and love someone and fall in love and get married again, show me that. But if you want me to stand for this person, right? And I didn't truly know what standing was, but in my mind, in my heart, I was like, if you want me to stand and not date and just wait for you to restore this marriage, because who you bring together, let no man separate. I was like, then show me that in a dream. I said, but either way, I need you to show me if I'm free to date and love someone else and go about my business, or if there's something you need me to do with T, which is my ex-husband. I was like, just show me in a dream. I was like, I've never, had a prophetic dream before, but I knew I had been watching YouTube, right? And I was very new to even YouTube. I had been watching YouTube and so many people he was speaking to through dreams, right? And I knew biblically it's in the Bible. So I'm like, just show me in a dream like you show other people since, you speak to other people this way. I just wanted to know that I was in right alignment with God. I didn't want to go out and date someone else and get in a relationship and get married if that wasn't God's plans for me. So I was honestly asking with a clear heart. My heart was not set on restore me to my ex-husband because I still love him and all these things. Yes, I did. But I literally, when I prayed this prayer, and that's the thing, when you pray a prayer to God, you can't have the answer that you want him to say already on the forefront of your heart. If that's on the forefront of your heart, that's how people have dreams that come from their flesh. And they wake up saying, ooh, I had a dream from God. Your dream, Satan doesn't give you dreams. He's not the giver of dreams. He can't even read your mind. He can give you thoughts, but Satan does not give you dreams. I don't care what nobody say. You will never find that in the Bible. Satan does not give prophetic gifts. So your dreams come from one or two places, your flesh your fleshly desires that may be on the forefront of your heart. Remember, God tells us to guard our heart, for out of it flows the issues of life. So if my fleshly desires and my wants and my needs is what's on the forefront of my heart, and that's what I'm thinking on all day long, guess what I'm going to have dreams about? The things that have my heart, right? But if God is on the forefront of my heart, what flows out into my life is going to be from Him. So I'm going to be able to properly hear Him through my dreams, through visions, because He is on the forefront of my heart. Not my desires, not my wants, not my needs, but Him. Okay? So I had a clear heart when I prayed this prayer. And in the wee hours of the morning on 10/11 of 2020, which is my nephew Jeremiah's birthday, God was very strategic. He gave me a dream of marriage restoration. And I remember waking up so happy. And it's funny because when I woke up, there was a sermon playing on my phone by itself. So as soon as I woke up from the dream, I knew what God was saying. And I can hear the sermon playing all by itself on my phone. And the pastor was saying, if it doesn't look like what God said, go back and look again and keep looking again until it looks like what God says. So as I'm waking up from this dream of marriage restoration, this pastor, which I wasn't playing a sermon on my phone, he's literally preaching and he says, go back and look again and look again and keep looking until it looks like God says it would look. And he mentioned the story of Elijah asking God to hold the rain, but then he prayed for the rain. And he kept sending his servant to go look to see if he saw anything. And he sent him to look again and to look again until it looked like what he had prayed for was coming. Y'all better catch this. So the pastor was preaching this on his phone, and that added fuel to the fire that I already had from what God had showed me. So I knew without a doubt, my ex-husband couldn't tell me otherwise. My ex-mother-in-law couldn't tell me otherwise. No pastor, preacher could tell me otherwise because I knew what God had showed me in my dream, and nobody was going to sway me. When I tell you that's the most faith that my faith was on high. And it wasn't just on high because God was going to restore marriage. It was on high because God actually heard me and answered my prayer. And He answered that prayer thoroughly. Like to the point I could not be swayed to the left or to the right. Nobody can sway me as far as like telling me, nah, God didn't say it. I knew what my Father had said. And at this time, like I said, I didn't have a ministry. I didn't have any of this stuff. But I knew what God had spoken to me loud and clear, right? And on top of that, the Lord began to speak to me. He said, I'm giving this to you on 10/11, your nephew Jeremiah's birthday, because the name Jeremiah means the one who I ordained. And that set me on an even bigger fire. I was on fire for God. Nobody could tell me nothing. And I remember, like, I was so immature in this walk at this time. So I remember even telling my ex-husband, God gave me a dream. He's going to restore the marriage. So whoever you date is not going to work. And I would hang up the phone on him. I was so childish. But God had to teach me real quick. Girl, I'm not giving you this prophetic dream or any other dream. Because after that, my prophetic dreams did not stop. They kept going and going and going. I would have journals and journals and journals of dreams. So me asking God for one thing opened the door to God, for God to push me into my calling. They never stopped coming. I mean, God would show me everything that was going on. He would show me, my ex-husband was dating at the time. He would show me it's not going to work. So I would literally call my ex-husband and be like, I don't care who you're talking to. It's not going to work. And I would hang up on him. And he thought it was so funny. He's like, what is going on? But I'll never forget one day he called me and he was like, everybody I'm meeting and they're beautiful and they meet all the requirements. He's like, I can't like them the way that I want to. And that set me on an even bigger fire because then you couldn't tell me nothing about my father. I was like, it ain't working because God told me it ain't gonna work. Like I was literally throwing it in his face like a little immature, I had to grow. But God had to tell me, girl, I'm not telling you this so you could go throw it in somebody's face and hang up on them. Like I'm telling you this in order to lead you and show you, right? So he had to teach me that stuff, but he gave me that dream. And like I said, that was 10/11/2020. Then at the end of November, my ex-husband reached out to me. We hadn't talked in like a month and a half. He reached out to me and he was like, I want my wife back. He's like, I need you here right now. Like, I want you here, da da da. And I just like that gave me an overabundance of faith in God because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing this restoration play out like God had told me a month ago. Right. And he flew me to Arkansas, which is where he lives, flew me to Arkansas. And I was so excited on the plane because I knew what God had showed me. And I'm like, here it is coming to pass. When I tell you my faith, guys, that was the most faith that I've had, and I've never lost faith in God. I've always had more than a mustard seed, okay? And all he requires is a mustard seed. My faith tank has always been well over that. But this was at a point in my life that my faith tank was overflowing. So I'm on the plane. I'm excited to get there because I'm like, the restoration is playing out. Like, God gave me this a month ago, right? I get to my ex-husband's house. This was the worst trip I've ever had in my life. I felt like I was on an episode of Punk'd. If you guys remember that show with Ashton Kutcher where he like pranks people, I felt like I was on an episode of Punk'd. It was the worst trip. There was arguments. My ex-husband was cruel. It was so much going on. I was so confused. And that trip took a huge bite out of my faith. It gave me a dents of disappointment. You know how somebody just rams the back of your car and it's one dent? I felt like somebody rammed my car and it hit on every single side. That's how dented my faith was. Like, I had dents of disappointment from that trip, and it took a huge bite out of my faith. And if I'm being honest, I don't think my faith has ever reached that level that I was on before that incident happened. My faith has never been at that level again. And this is just me being honest. I've always had faith in my father. I'm not gung-ho for marriage or anything because God, he's such a gracious God and he's so good. And the way he has refined me and remolded me, like, man, I'm never going to lose faith in God regardless of what happens. But my faith has never been at that level that it was on before that trip. It's never been like that again. I had so many dents of disappointment from that trip because I just knew what my father said was going to happen during that time, during my time there, right? And it didn't. I left, I feel like, in a worse state than I was when we actually were going through the divorce, if I'm being honest. It was a trip from hell. And I'm just gonna it was so bad, guys. It was so bad. I felt like I was in the military, army, navy, all the things with no training. It was bad. So I remember my last night there, or one of my last nights there, God gave me a dream. And in this dream, I was pregnant. And I had so much chaos around me in this dream. 2 men were trying to rape me and kidnap me. I had a snake chasing me. Like, I had people trying to hurt me. It was so much going on in this dream, guys. And I woke up from the dream and the Lord spoke to me loud and clear. He said, it's not time for you to give birth yet. You're surrounded by chaos. You're surrounded by evil. This is just a test, but it's not time for you to give birth yet. This isn't the time. My promise is what I promised, but this isn't the time. It's not time for you to give birth. This trip is not the time. I will never forget that. But my faith tank has never been at that level of full ever again because that hurt me so much because I knew that that was the trip that God was restoring my marriage. Without a doubt. I just knew. But of course, over the past few years, I came to an understanding that God does not wear an Apple Watch. He does not work on my time. He does not work on your time. He is not looking at a calendar. He does not have an alarm clock to wake him up. He does not sleep nor slumber. He is always at work. but his timing is not our timing. And if we're not connected to him for the right reasons on a deeper level, we will always be chasing moments that are out of season. We'll be chasing times that are not at the time, that it's not the time for them to develop. It's not time for us to give birth. Our time will be out of alignment with God's time. So over the course of these few years, I've learned that as God began to grow me and I began to steward my prophetic gift wisely. And as I came to know God better and to learn his character, I started to learn that he really sits higher than me and that I could be excited about something all day long, but it's only going to happen at his divine timing. But me taking a trip there and that chaos happening, that was all a part of God's story that was already written for me. I was supposed to go through that. But when you go through things like that and you're expecting God to do something, it's almost like you're expecting God gives you a dream and he tells you to go to this car lot and you're going to leave with a new car. So you go to this car lot, you're pumped up, you picked out the car, you had the down payment, and then something happens and you're not able to take that car home. Something happens to your faith during that time. And I can be honest with you guys because I keep it real. Something happens to your faith during moments like that. And it's like you begin to have dents of disappointment. Your faith in God is a little bit dented, okay, from an experience or experiences, because many people have went through several different things, right? So the Lord dropped that back in my spirit today as I was studying my devotional and just sitting with him. And he's saying from dents of disappointment to destiny, stop bracing for bad news. Whoever this is for, you've went through the dents of disappointment and now he's pushing you. He's opening the door for you to destiny, to what he actually said to you. But you're still bracing for bad news because of something or some things, more than one thing that happened in your past. Let it go. Let it go. God has never changed his mind about what he said he would do for you. But you needed to go through the dents of disappointment because that's what's pushing you into destiny. And now that you're being pushed into destiny, into this promise, into this thing, into this area that he spoke to you long ago, now you know how to steward it well. Had that been a time back in 2020 that God was restoring my marriage, you guys wouldn't even know me. I would not even be on YouTube. I wouldn't have a ministry. I would not have been coaching. I would not have known how to steward a marriage properly. So those dents of disappointments were for destiny because now I'm a different person. So different that if my ex-husband walked through the door right now, I would have to reintroduce myself because he doesn't know this me. He's never met this me. And one of the last times that we spoke, he said, I don't know this you. And that made me feel so good because you're right, you don't. My family doesn't even know this me. They still talk to me like I'm the person that is the person from years ago. They don't even know the gift I carry. So I would have to reintroduce myself to a lot of people. But God sets it up this way because when he brings an opportunity, a thing, a promise back around, you should not be the same person that you were when he made that promise to you. And this is the Holy Spirit speaking because I promise you guys, I do not have a notebook of notes in front of me. I have nothing. I am winging this word with the Holy Spirit's leading. Abraham and Sarah weren't the same Abraham and Sarah when the Lord fulfilled the promise. Isaac was one of their dents of disappointment. It didn't give Sarah the outcome she thought she'd have. It didn't make her happy and fulfilled. That was a dent of disappointment. Her weight was a dent of disappointment. But all of those dents of disappointment pushed her and Abraham into destiny. And now we get to live off of blessings through them. The dents of disappointment are always there to set you up for destiny so that you can handle it and steward it better than you would have before. When you are so eager to get something, you're not going to steward it well. It takes maturing. It takes progress, process. The end result isn't about the goal. It's about the strategy. The goal is going to always be the goal because God promised it to you. But there's a strategy that he has written for you to get to the goal. So now, with whatever marriage God sends my way, regardless of it being my ex-husband, a new person, whatever, his choice is for me. I'm never going to be the same person that I was when I first said I do. I'm never going to be the same person that I was when I went through a divorce. I know who I am in Christ. I know what I deserve in this life. I know what I bring to the table. I know who the foundation of my life is. And I know who deserves all the glory. These are all things that I had to learn through that process of dents of disappointment. I had to learn this. I thank God that I was discipled through God himself. He didn't put me underneath a person to be discipled or to learn this. God spoke to me through dreams, visions. He spoke to my heart. I've heard him audibly. God has discipled me. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with God using other people to disciple you, because he'll put people in your life to disciple you. That's what they're called to do, right? He put people under Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul's job was to teach, to transform, to revive dead areas. Like, he put people under Apostle Paul to learn from him, to be discipled through him. But then there's some people that God disciples himself. And I'm so grateful that he chose to disciple me. I'm so grateful that my journey doesn't look like another person's. I'm so thankful that my dreams are mainly parables. So a prophetic dream dictionary will not help me in my dreams. It'll teach me things, but for me to really understand what my dreams are about, God has to teach me. I remember even the Lord let me sit under Queen Alita for a little bit. She's a prophetic voice on YouTube. She's completely for God, sold out for the Lord. The Lord uses her. And I remember asking God a couple years ago if I can join her. She has dream teaching classes, right? And God let me stay in her class for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then he said, you're done. And I remember the last class I had with them, and they were an amazing group of people. But their dream interpretations were so like basic leveled that I would hear other people, because in the group we would discuss, dreams. And then people would just say what the Holy Spirit was telling them the dream meant. So it was like a way of teaching. And my interpretations were so far off from what they were getting. And I'm like, God, I know what you're speaking to me about these dreams. And he's like, I had to allow you to join this class so that you could see you're not a basic dreamer. And there's nothing wrong with basic dreams. I would love I have basic dreams sometimes that I wake up and I'm like, oh, this was straight to the point. It made sense. There was nothing parable about it. But 85% of my dreams are parables. And I have yet to see a prophetic voice that comes close to the parables that God gives me in my dreams. And that would confuse me in the beginning, because I was like, why is nobody dreaming like me and getting these type of interpretations that you're giving me? And he had to tell me, because I'm the one teaching you. I want to teach you myself. It wasn't him saying I'm better than anybody. We're all one body, different parts. But he needed to be the one to teach me. No human could teach me, this is what your dream means. God has used people to speak things, right? Because he uses us to help each other. But to completely understand my dreams, I had to sit underneath God and let him teach me what it means. And I've given you guys examples of this. Like in my dreams, when he uses dogs, he uses a dog to show prodigals. I had not heard nobody else say it on YouTube. So when God first gave me a dream and he said the dog represents a prodigal, I was like, where? Like, what? It was funny to me, to be honest, because you know how we call men dogs when they're cheaters. So my mind was going totally left worldly. And God was like, no, daughter, like, this is not Miami-Dade County. Like, I'm teaching you. This is like, follow me. Because I was like, oh, yeah, God, I get it. Like, they cheaters, like dogs. You know, Ruth, he's like, no. That just goes to show you guys how, like, I wasn't completely there. And he had to teach me. He's like, no, when I'm showing you dogs in your dreams, it's symbolic of prodigals, whether it's a man prodigal or a woman prodigal, but he's like a dog. A dog will eat from anybody's hands. Anybody holding out food, a dog will go and eat from it. But when you have a trained dog, when that dog has been trained thoroughly, that dog will not eat from anybody's hands. It will only eat from the hands of its master or from the hands that its master says is good. I said, wait a minute, Lord, that was deep. And when I began to release dreams about the dogs, I saw other prophetic voices that would be like, I saw this girl and she said a dog and it made so much sense for my dream. So the dog did represent prodigals. God was using me as a vessel to teach. But before God showed me that and I released words on it, I heard nobody saying anything about a dog means a prodigal. Never. And that's not to say in all dreams that's what it means, but in my dreams, when God is showing me a dog, majority of the time he's speaking of a prodigal. But I had to allow God to disciple me in order to know that. And I was just watching TV the other day and God had dropped in my spirit. He says, see, dog backwards spells God. He's like, so regardless, I got the final say. They come back to me. Y'all catching that? And I never looked at it like that. This is how much stuff goes over my head. He said, dog backwards spells God. When prodigals come back to me, I'm the end result. At the end of the day, his command is the end result. He said, I'm even in the dogs, the prodigals. Backwards is God. But forward in the way that they choose to go, it's a dog. But when they come back to God. So I shared this to say, the Lord is saying from dents of disappointment to destiny, stop bracing for bad news, because whoever this word is for, you're going into destiny and you're not bracing for bad news. God allowed you to go through that for a reason. But it wasn't so that you can keep getting dents of disappointment and bracing for bad news. The dents of disappointment were to push you into destiny. The bad news at that time, or what you consider bad news, because all things work for our good, even if it doesn't sound like it at the moment. But it was to get you to where God is taking you. So stop preparing to die and prepare for overflow. Stop acting like the widow with her son who was about to make the last little rice cake or whatever she was cooking in that oil, child. I'm paraphrasing, but she was about to make her son and her something to eat and die. And Elijah showed up. He's like, no, make me something to eat. Do this for me, and we're going to be good. And it never stopped overflowing for them. Her and her son didn't die. They had more than enough to eat. Even though what she saw in her hand was her last piece of bread before her and her son were going to die. Stop preparing to die and prepare for overflow. Whoever this is for, we are all in different seasons, so please don't grab something because, ooh, it sounds great. Because then you're going to have a dent of disappointment. You have to have a relationship with God to know where you are. If this is for you, this is not the first time that you're hearing this. God has already told you this. This is just confirmation. And if he is using me as the first time that you're hearing it, he's going to give you more on this. Take the word to him. Ruth, before she got to her Boaz, she had went through dents of disappointment. She had lost her husband. She was getting ready to walk away from the land she knew to go into a strange place that she had never been before, and she was getting ready to surrender her life to a God that she did not know. So she had to go through dents of disappointment to get to destiny. God wasn't sending her with Naomi to prepare for more bad news. She was going to prepare for marriage. She was getting ready to go from broke to rich and overflow. Esther had dents of disappointment. She was an orphan. When you're an orphan, you feel like nobody doesn't want you. You feel lost, isolated. Yeah, she had her uncle who adopted her, but you still feel alone and by yourself and not worthy. But her dents of disappointment were getting ready to push her into destiny, where she was going to become a queen. And sorry for the noise, guys. Kiara's like throwing something. I don't even know what's happening. But what was I saying? Esther is going from dents of disappointment. She went from dents, help me, Lord. She went from dents of disappointment to destiny. She became a queen and she made decisions that were going to save the people's lives. That's a big change, guys. That's a big change. Joseph, his dents of disappointment led to destiny. And at the end of the day, not only was he rich and in position, a restoration took place. And everybody that doubted him and tried to kill him off had no choice but to recognize that God's hands was upon Joseph the whole entire time. It's just that when he was thrown in the pit, it wasn't time for him to give birth to the promise yet. When Ruth was going through grief, it wasn't time for her to walk into her promise yet. But God had honored her first marriage. But with her marriage with Boaz, he was getting ready to bless that marriage and open her womb. She was being elevated, but she had to go through those dents of disappointment because at that time of loss and grief, it wasn't time for her to give birth yet. Just like God showed me in that dream, pregnant with chaos around me, snakes chasing me, people trying to rape me, people trying to kidnap me running for my life. It wasn't time for me to give birth to what God had spoken to me at that time. So I'm going to give you guys this verse that I feel like the Lord has had me give you this verse on several different words, but I'm going to be obedient. And it's Psalms 15, no, sorry, Psalm 16, verses 5 and 6. And I'm reading from the CSB version. It says, Lord, you are my portion and my cup of blessing. You hold my future. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. God has promised to give you beauty for ashes. And guess what? He's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. So he has not changed his mind. So I don't know who needed to hear this. And this word was way longer than I thought it would be. But it's okay. I love you guys. I pray that this blesses who it's for. And we'll talk soon, guys. Bye.